We'll begin with BP. $4.5 billion in guilty pleas to charges of manslaughter and lying to Congress. That was the admission today from BP, 2.5 years after the Deepwater Horizon disaster in the Gulf of Mexico. That disaster killed 11 people, led to the worst oil spill in U.S. history. In its guilty plea today, BP said it deeply regrets the loss of life and almost 5 million barrels of oil that spilled into the Gulf. Darren Gersh reports.
Justice Department officials hope today's settlement and criminal pleas will bring justice to the families of the men who died when the Deepwater Horizon exploded.
Perhaps the greatest tragedy is that the deaths of the 11 men on board the Deepwater Horizon could have been avoided. The explosion of the rig was a disaster that resulted from BP's culture of privileging profit over prudence.
BP has agreed to plead guilty to 11 counts of felony manslaughter and 1 felony count of lying to Congress. In addition, 2 BP supervisors on the Deepwater rig have been charged with 23 counts of manslaughter. Another BP executive was charged with lying to Congress. BP will also pay a record-setting $4 billion in criminal fines and penalties. Thrown in with the criminal charges is a civil settlement with the Securities and Exchange Commission. BP will pay more than $500 million to settle charges it lied to investors, telling them the Macondo spill was 1/10 its actual size.
BP executives made numerous public statements in which they stood behind the flow rate estimate of 5,000 barrels, despite an ever-growing body of evidence that the estimate was unreasonably low.
BP has now resolved 2 massive problems. It has settled a long-running dispute with its partners in Russia, and now it has put to rest the risk of a criminal trial in the United States.
It's a record settlement. It's hard to say admission of guilt and a $4.5 billion fine is a good thing for a company, but this could be the beginning of the end of this saga for BP.
BP is not done yet. It still faces up to $20 billion in civil penalties. A trial in that case is scheduled to begin in February. Darren Gersh, NBR, Washington.
Joining us now, Mitchell Krusto. He's a law professor at Loyola University in New Orleans, and he's been studying the BP case closely and the relationship between business and the environment. Mitch, let me just begin by asking you, how important is today's settlement?
Well, Susie, this is a really big story, but not quite the biggest yet. We still have more dollars at stake.
But in terms of how important this record settlement is, tell us a little bit more.
Well, it is a record settlement, but it does encompass quite a few different features. I mean, in addition to the felony charges, there's also the SEC investigation and the resolution of that matter, and that's a big deal.
Now, as you heard in our report, Darren is saying it's not over yet. The government is bringing gross negligence charges against BP. BP is going to fight it vigorously. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, it's very difficult for BP to avoid the gross negligence standard when they've actually admitted to felony charges that are related to the same matters relative to tainting the environment. What's at stake now is some $20 billion. So as I said, this is a big story, but it is an even bigger story ahead.
There have been so many fines and a lot of legal judgments. Is there a silver lining to all of this? I mean, does this make the deep water drilling safer going into the future?
Well, it certainly is a good story for BP, and hopefully their investors and shareholders will see the company in a greater light. But unfortunately, we're not going to see the end of oil spills. I mean, this is a slap on the wrist. It doesn't change regulations, and it doesn't change the risk involved. And fortunately, BP was a reasonably qualified company to do this type of drilling. There's probably other drillers who may not be even as careful as BP has been in the past and may not be in the future.
So put all of this into perspective, between all the fines, the potential prison terms, the apologies from BP. Is there any satisfaction here for the victims? Does the punishment fit the crime?
Well, Susie, not really. I think it's just not enough. We still have the 11 people who died as a result of the disaster, number one. Number two, there's still risk involved that the regulations and the process of risky drilling encumbers. And really, this is still not enough I think, to stop companies who don't want to do business the right way from doing business the same way they've done in the past. Just not enough.
All right, we're going to leave it there. A lot of issues still unresolved here. Thank you so much, Mitch. Mitchell Crusto of Loyola University in New Orleans.
Thank you.